My husband's best friend's son has been getting a little too touchy-feely with my daughter. Normally, that wouldn't be the biggest issue, but here's the problem. I suspect my husband might actually be his father. That thought terrifies me, because I don't know how to stop things from heading in a direction that feels, well, wrong. Like full-on Alabama wrong. This all started years ago as just a dark, fleeting thought. An intrusive little thing I tried to shake off. But instead of fading, it grew and grew until it turned into this poisonous flower that bloomed inside me, infecting my entire psyche. I'm 42, married to my husband Luke, who's 43. His best friend is Amy, also 43. I met Luke back in college, but he's known Amy since they were 7. They do everything together. They understand each other in a way that almost feels uncanny. Their bond has always been described as sibling-like. When I first started dating Luke, I'll admit I felt threatened by Amy and how close she was to him. But both of them reassured me, over and over, that there was nothing romantic between them. There never had been. Amy was like the sister Luke never had. Eventually, I believed them and my insecurities faded. Amy even became my friend, too. She officiated our wedding. Luke and I built a good life together, and our relationship has always been strong. After marriage, when we moved in together, Amy was still around all the time, and I was fine with that. I even went out with her to help her meet men since she always complained about being unlucky in love. Around the same time Luke and I started having kids, Amy started having kids too. For context, our kids are Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy's kids are Tom, 17, Kaylee, 14, and the twins, Adam and Jenna, 9. But here's the thing. Amy was never in a real relationship during any of her pregnancies. She wasn't married. She dated here and there, but nothing serious. As Luke and I kept having kids, Amy would pop up pregnant again. It became a weird, repeating cycle. Whenever I asked who the father was, Amy would just shrug and say she didn't know. She never seemed stressed about raising children alone. Luke and I both assumed maybe she was having casual flings with men and simply not keeping in touch with them. Each time I asked about paternity, her answer never changed. And honestly, she didn't seem bothered at all. Of course, she always had us. Luke would never let Amy struggle while raising kids. Financially, we're comfortable. My job pays well, and Luke's parents are wealthy. They already loved Amy, and they were more than happy to help her too. Between them and us, Amy and her kids never went without. Some people might call her a leech, but I never did. She needed help, and we had the means to give it. Now people might ask, why didn't Amy ever use birth control? That's complicated. She always refused. It wasn't religious, but she had her own reasons. She explained them to me a few times, but to this day I can't say I fully understood. She just accepted whatever came of that choice. Because Amy was Luke's best friend, it wasn't unusual for them to hang out without me. Sometimes he went over to her place, sometimes he even stayed overnight. I did the same with Amy sometimes, though not nearly as much as he did. She was his friend first, after all. Looking back now, maybe I was naive. Maybe I was a fool to trust so easily. But honestly, for years, they just seemed like buddies, like siblings. I never picked up on romantic tension between them. As expected, our kids and Amy's kids grew up together. Not under the same roof, we don't have space for 8 kids, but they were always around each other. They've grown very close, and if I'm right about Luke being their biological father, that closeness is more than friendship. It might be blood. So let me just put it plainly. I strongly suspect Luke is the father of at least one of Amy's children, maybe all of them. I never thought Luke was capable of cheating. He's never given me obvious signs of being unfaithful. But he has spent so much time with Amy. And I can't ignore the fact that Amy has never really had a boyfriend. Sure, she's flirted at bars. I've even played wingman for her. But nothing ever came of it. So every time she turned up pregnant, my suspicion grew. After our youngest, Carter, was born, Luke and I agreed he would get a vasectomy. Amy's twins had arrived a couple of years earlier. And after Luke's procedure, neither of us had to worry about pregnancy anymore. Coincidentally, or maybe not, Amy never got pregnant again after that. Is that just chance? Or is it because Luke was her father's source all along, and now that was no longer an option? That thought eats at me. What really unsettles me is the way Luke treats Amy's kids. He has always been like a father to them. At first, I thought it was sweet, noble even. But when you put it all together, the timing, the closeness, the resemblance, it feels like too much. Yes, resemblance. I won't give specific details, but Amy's children look like Luke. Some share distinctive physical traits with him. Kaylee has a rare allergy that Luke also has. The twins especially. Adam could be Luke's twin. And the older Tom gets, the more he reminds me of Luke, not just in appearance but in personality. On top of that, Amy is one race and Luke is another. And Amy's kids? They look biracial. I've never said any of this to Luke or Amy. I don't want to drop a bomb that destroys everything. Guilty or innocent, they'd deny it, and the fallout would hurt everyone. If our kids or Amy's ever learned the truth, the damage would be irreversible. So I stay quiet. I smile. I let Luke spend time with Amy and her kids. Our kids spend time with them too. And inside, I carry this suspicion, this poisonous thought, every single day. I've hinted to Luke that I feel needy for more attention, that I wish he wouldn't give so much of himself to Amy. But he either misses my cues or pretends not to notice. And truthfully, it's not even that he's neglected me. He hasn't. He's never favored Amy over me in a way that was obvious. I just can't shake this deep feeling that he and Amy have been intimate, probably many times. From what I know, Amy never really planned on being a mother. She wasn't against it, but motherhood wasn't some dream she chased. When her children came, she loved them instantly, but it never seemed like part of her life plan. So I don't think this is a case of Luke secretly providing Amy with children because she wanted them. If anything, the pregnancies were just side effects of infidelity. I've been turning a blind eye for years. After Kaylee's allergy was discovered, that was my first red flag. I dismissed it. Then the twins were born. Another red flag. I dismissed it again. When Amy stopped having children, I wanted that to reassure me. But instead, it made things worse. Because Luke had gotten the vasectomy, and that lined up too perfectly. There are nights when I wish the twins were younger, that they had been conceived after Luke's procedure. That way I could rule him out completely. But I can't. It's been twisting me into knots for a long time. But the truth is, I don't want to be the one who rips our family apart, especially since technically, I could still be wrong. Except now I'm very afraid, because in the last few months there's been a new development in our kids' social circle. Tom, Amy's eldest, asked Sophie out. Sophie, my eldest, has really blossomed over these last few years. She's become outspoken, confident, and undeniably beautiful. So I'm not shocked she's getting male attention. But Tom asking her out? That completely threw me. Sophie said no, but only because she knew I'd be protective about her exploring dating, and she wanted to ask me first. I could tell she was flattered, even intrigued by his attention. Honestly, she wanted to say yes. She came to me to talk about it. Bless her heart, she did everything right. I think she fully expected me to agree, that I'd see it her way. Instead, I very firmly said no. That caused some conflict. She didn't even want to date him that badly. She just couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to. I couldn't explain the real reason, so all I could come up with was, he's too old for you. Which he is. But that's not the real issue. When Amy and Luke found out, I was so curious to see their reactions. A small part of me was hoping one of them would push back, argue that Tom and Sophie should be allowed to date. If they had, I think I would have felt relieved. Because if they agreed with Sophie, then maybe that would have been proof that I was wrong. Wrong about Luke and Amy, wrong about paternity, wrong about everything. But that's not what happened. They took my side. Both of them. They put their foot down, though not as fiercely as I did. Luke agreed, but he also worried that forbidding them outright might only make Sophie want it more. And he's probably right. Amy was more apathetic. She didn't want Tom to date Sophie either, and she backed me up, but she treated it like a passing crush. Well, it wasn't. In the months since, Tom has been spending more and more time with Sophie, alone or with other friends whenever they can. It's become painfully clear that Tom is crazy about her. He wants to be with her, and he definitely wants things to turn physical. I've been watching them like a hawk, and I've seen the way his eyes linger on her. I'm doing everything I can to nip this budding romance in the bud, but I feel powerless. Sophie hasn't openly defied me. She's just hanging out with Tom's group of friends. Forbidding her from seeing him would seem unreasonable and probably backfire, making her sneak around instead. But I'm terrified that's already happening, that they're secretly dating, doing who knows what behind my back. I've caught Tom being handsy with Sophie, and she doesn't seem to object. I don't know what to say to her. I considered telling Sophie that Tom is like her brother. But if she doesn't feel that way, I can't rewrite her emotions or undo the history of their friendship. That's the heart of the problem. I've always seen Amy and her kids as family. But to my kids, Amy's kids are more like best friends. If I'm right, if Luke really has been carrying on an affair all these years and fathering Amy's children, then Tom and Sophie are siblings, half-siblings, which means under no circumstances can they ever be anything more than friends. End of discussion, but I feel powerless to stop it. Luke says he's talked to Tom. Amy has too. But Tom is relentless. He won't give up on Sophie. And Sophie? She loves the attention. She glows under it. Tom even confronted me directly, asking why I was so against the two of them when I know him well and know he'd treat Sophie well. I had nothing to fall back on except she's too young for you. But that excuse won't hold forever. God forbid, if they're still attracted to each other in a few years, they'll pursue it freely. Once they're adults, I won't be able to stop them. Amy and Luke both agree with me that Tom can't date Sophie, but that's as far as it goes. They don't push. They don't act. They just shrug, as if teen love is something you can't fight. Sometimes it feels like they've given up, burying their heads in the sand, waiting for Tom and Sophie to grow out of it. Sure, they're young. And yes, teenage crushes don't always last, but my fear is that Tom will get what he wants before it fades, that Sophie will let him do something intimate, something she can never take back. I feel this close to blowing everything wide open, to screaming at Luke that none of this would even be happening if he hadn't cheated on me, if he hadn't been raising a second family with his so-called sister all these years. Now his son wants to smash our daughter. His actual daughter. Because as far as Tom knows, Sophie's just a childhood friend. It's all Luke and Amy's fault. But if I speak up, everything gets destroyed. On the off chance that I'm wrong, I'll be the monster. I'll be the horrible wife and friend who accused the love of my life and one of my closest friends of doing something unforgivable. If I'm right, it tears everything apart anyway. The family, the social structure we've built, the kids' relationships, all of it crumbles. Even if Luke and I don't divorce, life will never be the same. If I do nothing, Sophie will end up Tom's girlfriend. She'll sleep with him, maybe sooner than I want to imagine. Hell, maybe it's already happened under my nose. I keep telling myself this will fade as they mature, but what if it doesn't? What if they stay together? What if they marry and want kids someday? If I tell Sophie the truth, then the truth comes out to everyone. And it will ruin lives. My kids' perception of their father will shatter. Their bond with Aunt Amy will be gone. Luke is Owen's hero. How do I destroy that? And Amy's children? None of this is their fault. They didn't choose this. They don't deserve the pain of finding out. Even Tom, as angry as I am with him. Last week I saw him put his hand on Sophie's thigh and I wanted to knock his teeth in. He doesn't deserve to carry the weight of knowing that the girl he's fantasizing about is his half-sister. It's so messed up, and I don't know what to do. I've been looking the other way, letting my husband and his best friend insult my intelligence for years. I thought I could live with it. But this situation with Tom and Sophie, it has me deeply distressed. Update. 3 days later, first of all, wow. I did not expect my post to blow up the way it did. I was half afraid someone in my family or social circle would stumble across it, especially when someone messaged me saying the post had been shared on Facebook. But as far as I can tell, no one close to me has seen it. I want to thank all of the kind commenters who wished me well. To those who were frustrated with my indecision, I get it. But I was dealing with an impossible situation. The stakes were incredibly high. No matter what choice I made, something would go wrong. For years, I've been playing out different scenarios in my head, imagining all the ways this could end if I ever acted on my suspicions. To everyone clamoring for an update, here it is. I said before that I was planning on doing a secret DNA test, and I had decided to go through with it. In the end, I couldn't. I lost my nerve, and now I regret it, because the window to do so has closed. The door basically closed on that option, and honestly, it felt out of line for me to do that to someone else's child behind their back. Ethically, it was dicey. I've since consulted with my lawyer, like so many commenters suggested, and she advised me against it, because no matter the results, it could make me look bad in a potential divorce proceeding. But the truth is, I really wish I had just done it anyway and not told anyone, because I so badly need to know. And I still don't know for sure. I also wanted to tell Sophie in confidence, but the more I thought about it, the more even that felt wrong. Planting those kinds of ideas in her mind about her father without even talking to him first seemed over the line. So what I ended up doing was confronting Luke and Amy, something many comments suggested as well. I finally told both of them that we needed to have a serious talk. It felt counterproductive to approach just one of them, because I figured they would tell the other in their own words before I could properly prepare. I wanted them both to hear what I had to say. Once all the kids were at school, I laid out all of my suspicions and the reasons behind them. I made it clear how much I love both of them, but also explained that a combination of clues had led me to notice the similarities between Luke and Amy's children, and I didn't even list all of them in my original post. For example, Luke has been a sleepwalker in the past, and so have Sophie, Tom, and Adam. I told them over and over how much they meant to me, and that I didn't want to believe any of this. But the thought had crept into my mind before. I had always dismissed it. Yet now, with Tom and Sophie having crushes on each other, it became necessary to ask the question. So I asked, had they ever crossed the line? Had Luke ever been unfaithful? Was there even the slightest possibility that any of Amy's children were his? I was just trying not to cry. They reacted exactly how I would have expected. Their responses were so perfect and so well-rehearsed that I genuinely couldn't tell if it was honest emotion or powerful gaslighting. Amy was more upset than Luke, at least more outwardly upset. She was angry, offended by the accusation. Luke just seemed heartbroken by it. Maybe they were acting, but I don't know. Somehow they had reasonable responses to all my points, and they asked me questions I didn't know how to answer. Why had I never objected to them spending time alone before? Why did it suddenly bother me now? Do Amy's children really resemble Luke that much, or are traits like hair color pretty basic to share in common? The whole family had always treated Amy and her kids as part of our unit, and I had even commended Luke in the past for stepping up and being a father figure to Amy's kids, since they didn't have one. So why was I now saying it was a bad thing? What exactly did I want them to do? How could I think such a thing about them? And why had I waited so long to say something? Luke was more understanding than Amy. He respected my feelings, or at least acted like he did. Amy, on the other hand, seemed to feel more betrayed by what I said. I ended up apologizing several times, even though I'm not sure I did anything wrong. Luke also apologized for anything he might have done that made me think he was unfaithful. When I asked Amy more pointedly, if not Luke, then who? Who had fathered her children, she snapped back that it was none of my business. I could tell she wasn't in the mood to get personal or vulnerable with me after my accusations. I'm not proud to say this, but I lost my temper. I said that after everything we had done for her and her children, that kind of information wasn't a lot to ask. Maybe she even owed it to us. I regretted the words the second they left my mouth. Amy shouted back that I had never done anything for her, that it was Luke and his parents who had kept her afloat all these years, not me. Then she launched into a longer tirade, accusing me of always acting superior to her. I don't believe I ever did that, though it's possible I unintentionally gave off that vibe. Luke did his best to calm her down, but the tension in the room was undeniable. I don't know. I just don't know. This is driving me to the edge of madness. There is a way to be certain, of course, not certain of my husband's fidelity, but of the paternity of Amy's children. So I asked Luke, for my own peace of mind, for Sophie's sake, and for the sake of our family unit, if he could please get a DNA test done. A paternity test. I explained that I knew he disliked and distrusted such things, but that I really needed this. I could see the pain in Luke's eyes. Maybe it was an act, but he seemed genuinely hurt that I was asking for this, that his word, that he had always been faithful, wasn't enough for me. But very reluctantly, he agreed to participate in a DNA test. Unfortunately, Amy did not agree. And that's where we hit a roadblock. I was afraid this would happen. Amy was infuriated at the entire concept and told me in no uncertain terms that I would not be getting samples of her children's DNA. She basically told me to go fuck myself for even asking. I pressed Luke, but honestly he was a bit useless in this situation, though probably right. He tried to convince Amy, but she wouldn't hear of it. When I pushed him for more support, he just kind of shrugged, saying he couldn't force her to do the test. And he's right. If she refuses, that's really a dead end. I've looked into it quite a bit and even consulted my lawyer. There's no way to proceed without Amy's cooperation. The problem is Luke could, in theory, petition the court to demand a paternity test for Adam and the others. The issue is that to do this, he'd essentially be admitting that he slept with Amy and believes her children could be his. That would have to be his version of events. But Luke has staunchly insisted that nothing ever happened with Amy, that he never cheated on me. Whether or not he's being honest is another story, but he'd have to go on record making a claim he isn't prepared to make. He is certain the children aren't his and has no intention of fighting for custody. So even though a legal route exists, Luke won't pursue it, because it would contradict his insistence on being faithful. And no judge is going to compel Amy to submit DNA samples from her children. Tom is also old enough that his consent would be required. And if both he and Amy refuse to participate, it's unlikely Luke would have a case. He'd have to target one of Amy's younger children, like one of the twins, but he doesn't want to do that. He's unwilling to take his best friend to court to prove something that, in his words, he already knows isn't true. Luke is asking me to please let this go and trust him, because pursuing it further will fracture everything. And according to my lawyer, it's not realistic anyway. For Luke to establish paternity, he would have to admit to an affair in the first place. And he's not willing to do that, but honestly, if he did, that alone would be all the proof I needed to confirm my suspicions, even if I'd need more for a court case. I pressed Luke further about Tom and Sophie, insisting that I didn't want them dating. Luke agreed, and apparently Amy still agrees. Luke plans to have a serious talk with Tom and go into protective Papa Bear mode. Among other things, he's going to remind Tom that once he turns 18 in a couple of months, being intimate with Sophie will literally be a crime. I wouldn't actually press charges, because I know Tom wouldn't do anything against Sophie's will. But I'm not above implying the threat, and thankfully Luke isn't either. I did ask Luke if he'd be open to potentially swiping a sample of Tom's DNA for a private paternity test, but he was very hesitant. Like me, he views it as unethical. He also pointed out that if we did this and Amy found out, it would likely mean the end of our friendship with her. Luke believes that things are still in a salvageable state, that Amy and I could reconcile and become friends again. And I can see how much he wants that to happen. But if I did a DNA test on Tom behind Amy's back and she found out, she would likely hit the roof. And honestly, I wouldn't entirely blame her, though I'd be very interested to see the results. Luke ended up going to see Amy and spending the night. I know, you're probably cringing and throwing up your hands, and trust me, I wasn't happy about it either. That was a very long conversation, but he was adamant that he needed to perform damage control. So they spent the night together, with Luke insisting that nothing happened. I didn't sleep a wink and kept texting him for updates. From what I can gather, Amy will cool off, but she needs some time. When Luke and I talked things over the next morning, it was an emotionally fulfilling conversation. We ended up agreeing to take the kids, our kids, not Amy's, to visit their grandparents for a few days. It was an impromptu visit, but we've done it before, and they were delighted to have us. I really just wanted our family to spend some time together away from Amy's side of the family, so to speak. I always love seeing my in-laws. I refer to them as Jim, 75M, and Kat, 67F. I know Reddit is famous for stories about the mother-in-law from hell, but in my life, that couldn't be further from the truth. I feel safe with them, to the point that when they noticed how distant Luke and I seemed from each other, I finally relented and confessed my fears. I told them about my anxiety, that I suspected Amy and Luke might be having an affair, and that Amy's children could be his. Here's where things got a little interesting. When I told them what I was feeling, Kat gave Jim this pointed look and let out a big, dramatic sigh. It turns out Kat has had similar misgivings to mine over the years. She's genuinely suspected that Luke and Amy were closer than they'd ever admit, and that they may have crossed the line in the past. Jim, on the other hand, refuses to even entertain the idea. He's always insisted that Kat is seeing things that aren't there, maintaining that Luke and Amy are like siblings and would never do such a thing. Kat thinks his stance is naive, pointing out that even though she and Jim had taken Amy in and loved her like a daughter, that doesn't mean Luke viewed her as a sister, or that Amy viewed him as a brother. Jim continued to insist that Luke and Amy have always been like siblings, and I could tell he and Kat had already had this conversation before. They kept going in circles, with Kat getting exasperated. She pointed out that surrogate siblings or not, Luke and Amy aren't actually brother and sister, so nothing would have stopped them from being physical together if they felt mutual attraction. At that point, Jim just sighed and walked away from the conversation. It became clear that Kat has privately wondered for years whether Amy's children might have been Luke's. This is part of why. She has always treated them as her grandchildren. To be clear, I never minded that. I also don't fault Kat for not voicing these concerns to me sooner. She had no proof, and she saw far less of Luke and Amy's closeness in our adult lives than I did. As for the kids, they're doing all right. I don't know what Amy told her children, but the general consensus, the official version of events, is that Amy and I had a fight and need a break from each other. That's what Luke and I told our children when they pressed for more details. Luke defended me and shut down further questions, saying it wasn't their business. I'm not sure if Amy stuck to that version. But our children and hers still have each other's phone numbers and social media, so they've presumably been in contact over the last couple of days. I suspect my kids have kept Amy's kids in the loop with any updates, and if Amy had told them anything significant, they probably would have relayed that information to my children. It's clear that Sophie and Tom are still very close. I did try to talk to Sophie about it more, but the timing was off. She rejected my counsel and interpreted my reinforced reluctance as being related to my fight with Amy. Sophie insisted she wasn't dating Tom, though I'm not entirely sure if that's true, but she made it clear she was going to remain close friends with him. While she's not usually a disobedient child, she put her foot down on this one. To be fair, I can't really justify separating them or forbidding their friendship. They've known each other for years. Luke agrees with me on not allowing them to date, but he doesn't support the idea of preventing them from hanging out altogether. I wish I had a more definitive update. If anything significant happens in the next few days, I'll let you all know. I'm mostly just kicking myself for not going through with the secret DNA test, even just for my own peace of mind. Now I feel like I've lost the only opportunity to get definitive proof one way or the other. Second update. One day later, I didn't expect to have another update so soon, but after posting my last one, I did a lot of thinking about my kids. I ultimately decided that whatever else happened, I needed to warn Sophie about the situation, and do so immediately. To hell with what it meant for Luke, or the fallout with the other kids. Sophie needed to be aware of what she might be getting herself into, so I discreetly kept Sophie out of school. Last night we went back home, and this morning I dropped everyone else off but saved Sophie for last. Instead of taking her to school, I drove past it and told her we needed to talk. That's always a frightening thing for a teenager to hear from a parent, but I quickly reassured her she wasn't in trouble. I explained she needed to know the truth about why Amy and I were fighting, and why her dating Tom was out of the question. I very gently told her that because of Luke's closeness to Amy and the striking resemblance Tom bears to him, I had come to suspect that Luke and Amy may have been intimate at some point. I explained that if there was any chance Tom's father was actually Luke, then her dating him would be a significant problem. Sophie was quiet during all of this, and even after I had stopped talking to let her respond, she paused for quite a while. Finally, she said that we needed to get Tom and discuss this with him as well. I had no objections, so she texted him to meet with us. They're both skipping school today, but Sophie gets straight A's, and this is extremely important, so I looked the other way. Tom came to meet us, and Sophie had me relay what I had told her to him as well. I apologized to him for any indication I might have given that I didn't think he was good enough for my daughter, and to both of them for not telling the truth sooner. Tom and Sophie just gave each other this oddly knowing stare, and that's when they blew my mind. Sophie spoke first, with Tom backing her up. They revealed to me that, in fact, they had already known about Luke and Amy, or at least, they had strongly suspected. Apparently, Tom had overheard conversations that were quite questionable, as well as the sounds of intimacy from Amy's room, sounds he would rather forget. But all signs pointed to Amy's lover being Luke. Tom had wondered for a very long time, and back in January he finally voiced his fears to Sophie. She agreed with him. She had also noticed a strange sort of closeness between her. Father and his mother both agreed that Luke was likely having an affair. They also agreed that because of Kayle's allergy, Luke might very well be her father. And if Kaylee was Luke's daughter, then the rest of Tom's siblings could be Luke's as well. Tom himself could even be Luke's child. The math led them to the same conclusions as mine. So Sophie and Tom came up with a little plan. As it turns out, they are not in love, they never were. They're still just best friends. But they had the same instinct as me. They didn't want to blow up our entire family and social circle without more direct evidence. That's what Tom has been working on acquiring. Sophie had very much wanted to tell me the truth, but she hesitated because she knew it would shatter me. She had no idea I was already suffering in silence. Sophie apologized for not voicing her suspicions sooner. Honestly, we both cried, and I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault and that I loved her very much. So the bottom line is this. Sophie and Tom already know they could be half-siblings. They're not actually interested in being a couple. That was their idea. A way to rock the boat, to force Luke and Amy to finally do something about the situation instead of just making a fool out of me. I also think it was Tom and Sophie's way of punishing them for their affair. Teenagers can be vindictive, so they concocted this plan, pretend they wanted to date. Every flirtation I witnessed, every inappropriate touch, apparently it was all staged for the benefit of Luke, Amy, or both. The whole point was to make them sweat. Tom and Sophie expected Luke and Amy would leap out of their seats to forbid it. But when I was the one who stepped in, it threw the kids off. They couldn't understand why I cared more than the actual cheaters. That's when they began to suspect I might already know. Tom confronting me that one time. "Why can't I date Sophie?" was his way of trying to gauge whether or not I knew. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Sophie and Tom have always been close friends who confided in each other. Maybe I should be a little more concerned about how sneaky they've been, but honestly, I'm just so relieved they're not dating. Sure, they could be lying just to throw me off the scent. I guess that's possible. But they already knew they were likely related and didn't even blink when I told them. We even had a bit of a laugh when Tom admitted he had been a little offended that I was so against him dating my daughter. I kind of jokingly asked him, "So you don't think she's gorgeous?" And Tom, bless his heart, just shrugged it off, saying, "She is, but so is my English teacher, and I'm not asking her out either." Either way, the question now is where to go from here. We have to figure that out. I will say this, though. It's such a relief to have told Sophie. I feel like an elephant has lifted one of its feet off my chest. Having her in my corner, and Tom too, means so much to me. Even though I've basically just had it confirmed that Luke is sleeping with Amy, I kind of already knew that anyway. Now it's just a question of how to proceed. Tom has already volunteered to submit his DNA so I can compare it to Luke's. Both he and Sophie advised me not to tell Luke or Amy when I do this, and I agree. They're completely on my side, and that means more to me than I can ever express. Tom has also been trying to set up a camera in Amy's room to catch her and Luke in the act. Sophie told me flat out that I needed to divorce her dad. Hearing that from my own daughter made it clearer than it's ever been. She's right. Third update, 2 days later. First, a few points to address from the comments. I don't have any DNA test results back yet. That can take weeks, but now that I know Sophie is in no danger of dating a relative, the pressure is off. I'll get into this in a moment, but frankly, it no longer matters if Luke fathered Amy's children. I highly doubt my father-in-law is having an affair with Amy. At worst, he might know, or at least suspect, the truth about Amy and Luke. It's also possible he just refuses to believe they'd do such a thing. I've been vague about details for privacy, but to put it very simply, Jim and Amy are both pretty white. Cale and Luke are not. If Jim had fathered Amy's babies, they would look different than they do. Nevertheless, I do have an update. First things first, I mentioned this in the comments, but our little team has supposedly recruited my mother-in-law. I say supposedly because Sophie and Tom were going to talk to her about helping with the DNA test. And at the advice of my lawyer, I am officially staying out of the process. I told Sophie not to do it, and she said she wouldn't. My mother-in-law hasn't contacted me about it either, though we have been in touch. I'll get into that more in a moment. The bottom line is that I can honestly say I had no knowledge of any DNA test. Another bit of good news, while digging through paperwork in preparation for my divorce, wanting to get a head start against Luke, I noticed something. My name is on the paperwork for our home. Luke's name is not. I was the one who bought the house. We had always planned to add Luke onto the paperwork at some point, but we never got around to it. Eventually, the idea was forgotten. It was my lawyer, Paige, who pointed this out to me, and it felt like finding a winning lottery ticket on the ground. I don't know where I'd be without Paige. She's a dear friend from college who I reached out to, head in hands, for help. She's been there for me this past week, not just as legal counsel, but as the friend I desperately needed. Here's the thing. She's not our lawyer, not mine and Luke's. We have a family attorney who has helped us out of jams before. We clashed with our HOA a few years ago, not worth getting into now. But Paige is different. She specializes in family law and has handled divorces. Luke remembers her from college and knows she became a lawyer, but he doesn't know she's a divorce attorney. So I can have her over for coffee like we're just catching up, and he has no idea anything is going on. Turns out he's not the only one who can hide someone under his spouse's nose under the guise of friendship. Now onto the update. The last time I looked at Luke's phone was 3 months ago, around the time Sophie and Tom started pretending they wanted to date. I found nothing then. I knew how to search for recently deleted photos, but I didn't see anything suspicious. But thanks to some comments, I learned how to check recently deleted messages. So when Luke was asleep, I swiped his phone, brought it downstairs, and checked the recently deleted messages. I'm glad I did. But I also wish I hadn't because I'm still reeling from the pain. Sure enough, a conversation with Amy had been deleted. Recent texts between them discussed the conflict between her and me. Amy described me as a problem, and Luke tried to pacify her, without defending me at all. To be clear, they both alluded to the fact that they had expected this for a while. They just hoped it would never happen. Presumably, this meant me accusing them of having an affair. The fact that it was deleted was sketchy. Nothing was outright admitted, so I scrolled a bit higher to a few days before the fight. Amy's messages started getting a little flirty. Then I saw it. 5 days before I confronted them, Amy had sent Luke a selfie wearing nothing. I teared up. I knew it was true. I'd known it in my bones. But seeing the proof still cut me like a hot knife. I exited the Messages app and checked Luke's recently deleted photos. Sure enough, the same selfie was there, along with others. Amy in various poses to show herself off. Pictures of the two of them together, cuddled and pressed close like a couple. In some, she wasn't wearing anything. In some, they both weren't. There were videos. Amy had sent Luke a video message of herself completely naked. I had to actually hear her voice, sickeningly sweet, telling him she was sending him a quick video to help him get through the day. In more than one video, she called him her boo. Hearing her call him that made me almost vomit. I stopped looking at that point. I'd seen enough. for about 5 minutes anyway. Then a strange compulsion to keep searching took over, and I checked Luke's laptop. I knew enough of his passcodes to access his iCloud storage. And yeah, basically more of the same. There were letters, long letters between them. I didn't have the heart to read past the first few lines of one, but I did see Luke mention our children. There were countless images of Amy, selfies of them together, videos where Amy appeared to be touching herself. And there were even sex tapes, actual videos of the two of them. Tom had once offered to try hiding a camera in Amy's room, but hell, he never needed to. Luke was hiding a whole treasure trove under my nose all along. I scrolled and scrolled. There were so many, and it went back years. Not all of it was dirty. There were some photos of Amy's kids, too. One video of Kaylee and the twins playing together when they were younger, with Luke and Amy's voices behind the camera. There were even old pictures of Luke and Amy from when they were younger. I'd even say teenagers, I snapped. All these years I'd been telling myself I had to be wrong, that it couldn't be true. Well, it was true. I know no one forced me to look at as much of the evidence as I did, but I'm still hurting badly from having seen it. And in that moment, I wanted to act. So I did. I called Paige, my lawyer. It was the middle of the night, so I had to call her twice, but she finally picked up, groggy because I'd woken her. When I told her it was an emergency and asked her to come by, she agreed. I also asked her to draw up the paperwork and have it ready. She told me she'd already had it prepared since the first time I reached out. While I waited for her, I went through the necessary channels on Luke's laptop to make sure he couldn't remotely disconnect my access to his little stash. I changed passwords and all. When Paige arrived, I went outside to greet her in the car. I spent half an hour in the passenger seat just crying, and she was wonderful about it. Afterward, I handed her Luke's phone and laptop with all the information she'd need. She warned me this could technically be considered theft, so I asked her to forward and print out copies of everything she could, then bring the items back to me because I couldn't bear to do it myself. She agreed. I went back inside and started packing Luke's things while the house slept. At one point, Owen got up to use the bathroom and asked me what I was doing, but I told him I was just cleaning. Luke stirred once or twice while I was in the bedroom, but he didn't wake up. I got most of his things packed into trash bags and loaded them into the car. That's when I woke him up and told him to come outside. He was confused and half asleep, but he did notice things were missing. I ignored his questions and just told him to come with me, so he followed me outside. Once we were by the car, I pulled out the divorce papers and officially handed them to him. That's when he realized what I was doing. He tried to talk me out of it. He tried to be sweet with me, tender, insisting he loved me. He swore there had never been anything with Amy. He kept trying to persuade me not to tear our family apart. Even 2 weeks ago, I might have wilted under that. The manipulation and gaslighting were truly masterclass. But I can see through it now. I didn't tell him I knew he was full of it. I didn't tell him what I had seen. I just told him we were finished, then he tried a different approach. He refused to go, firmly stating that our children were his too, and that even if we were separating, I had no right to decide the kids would stay with me instead of him. That's when I very coldly presented the paperwork, reminded him that the house is in my name, and told him under no circumstances would my kids be staying with Amy. He argued for a while longer, but in the end he decided to be the bigger person and keep the peace. At that moment, I didn't care where he went. Before he left, he did ask about his phone and laptop. I waved him off, saying they were in one of the bags. I couldn't sleep for the rest of that night. I cried more. Eventually, I realized I'd have to wake my children early and explain as much as I could. Naturally, I woke Sophie first. I told her I had kicked her father out and discovered evidence of an affair on his devices. I didn't specify what kind of evidence, and she didn't ask. Then I woke the others and gently told them their dad had gone to stay somewhere else for a while. I wasn't sure where, but from now on, things were going to be different. Louise was the one who asked if we were getting divorced. I couldn't lie. I told her yes. Owen asked when they could see their father again, and I wanted to cry. Sophie was a big help, urging her siblings to be sympathetic to me right now and worry about Dad later. I knew better than to poison them against their father. Paige had warned me about that too. So I only told Sophie that the affair was confirmed, since she already knew. However, as the kids were getting ready for school, Owen approached me and asked point blank if it was about Amy. If Luke was going to be with her instead of me, I couldn't answer. But I suppose that was an answer on its own. I got the kids to school, and my next step was calling to have the locks changed. I knew Luke would be back for his devices before long. Thankfully, Paige returned them before he showed up again. It was a very quick visit. She just told me everything was accomplished, and that she had records of everything we'd need in court. Sure enough, Luke turned up an hour later, demanding to know where his laptop and phone were. I had set them back in our bedroom like they'd never moved. I just told him he had forgotten them. He insisted I had said they were in one of the bags. I shrugged him off, told him I must have been mistaken. After he grabbed them, he tried again to reason with me, but I just showed him the door. I knew the kids would start coming home from school soon, and I think he was trying to delay leaving so he could see them. I wasn't having it. I started shouting again and sent him on his way. I'm still in absolute pain and despair over what I saw. I don't know if he realizes that someone went through his devices and made copies of the evidence, or if he suspects that I saw anything, but he didn't say so. After he left, I cried again. Later that night, I talked to my mother-in-law. Apparently, Luke did show up at his parents' house, which honestly surprised me. I was so sure he'd stay with Amy, but maybe he knows how suspicious that would look to the kids and doesn't want to rock the boat too much. Maybe he also realizes I'd be more willing to let the children see their grandmother than Amy, and he wants to use that to give them his version of events. But that's not happening. Kat already told me the version of events Luke fed to her and Jim. He's claiming I'm having some kind of mental breakdown, that he wishes he could help me, but my paranoia is making me lash out and turn violent. That's a flat-out lie. I was never violent. The most I did was shove him away when he tried to hold me. What's so ridiculous is that when Luke told his parents his story, he didn't even mention Amy at all. He didn't even frame it as me falsely believing he was having an affair, which is what he tells me when we argue. To them, he left Amy out of the picture entirely. Kat noticed that, and she actually believes me. Jim, on the other hand, doesn't know what to believe anymore. According to Kat, he seemed very troubled by what he was hearing from all sides. As for Amy, she's been completely radio silent. Tom told Sophie that she's acting like nothing's wrong, but is clearly stressed when her kids ask questions. When they do, she gives them the same line Luke does, that I'm having some emotional or nervous breakdown and that I'm pushing both her and Luke away. She doesn't say a single word about me accusing them of an affair. She still frames it all as being about me. Amy hasn't reached out to me directly, and I haven't tried to talk to her since our big blow-up. I haven't told my kids much either, just that I'm having disagreements with Luke and Amy, and I made it absolutely clear it has nothing to do with my mental health. Honestly, though, I think the kids already know what's going on. Sophie has been my rock, and I try to be hers in return. Tom continues to act as our spy in the ranks, keeping me updated. Right now, my biggest regret is the stress this is causing the children. I knew it would happen, but it still hurts. Still, it had to be done. My life has fallen apart, but in truth, it was never really my life. Fourth update, 6 days later in my last post. Several of you criticized Paige. Well, you'll probably like this update, because it turns out you weren't the only ones with concerns about her. Regarding the deed being in my name, it's not an absolute slam dunk, but Paige is convinced that, combined with the fact that I've been the one paying the mortgage, I stand a very good chance. It could still be interpreted as common marital property, but I'm going for primary custody with supervised visits anyway. I'm playing hardball. Some of you also questioned whether I should still be posting these updates, but as long as it's anonymous, I'm in the clear. It doesn't matter if someone who knows me could piece it together. I've never used real names or revealed my location. As for the laptop, even Paige admitted that was questionable. But technically, I gave her permission, and she only did what I could have done myself. I just didn't want to go through all that content again. As for the divorce papers, Paige had them filled out after I first contacted her. Me serving them to Luke was more of a ceremonial move. She still contacted him later to officially serve him and request his lawyer's details. But before he could even respond, I had already done something a little sneaky. I reached out to our family attorney, the one who had represented both of us during the marriage. Let's call him Zach. He had helped us deal with an HOA issue a while back. Contrary to what some commenters suggested, I can't just go around consulting every lawyer in town to block Luke from hiring them. That's considered bad faith, and judges don't look kindly on it. But this was Zach. He had been our attorney for years, and I felt I had just as much right to him as Luke did. I got there first, so I was able to secure him. I met with both Zach and Paige, and wow, do they not like each other. Zach raised some of the same concerns many of you did, pointing out that some of Paige's actions were in a gray area. He urged me to hire him instead for the divorce. That caused some tension since Paige specializes in family law, and this is her area of expertise. So I've decided to consult with both of them moving forward. Interestingly, Zach actually thinks it's a good thing I've been making these posts. He said they can only help prove my sanity when Luke and Amy try to argue otherwise. Overall, I'm doing better. I've been talking to a friend in real life, the mom of one of Sophie's friends. I also have therapy scheduled for myself, and I plan to look into family therapy for the kids as well. When my children ask what's going on, I tell them simply, their father and I are having adult problems, and it's nothing they need to worry about. That worked for maybe a day. Then Sophie warned me they were planning to confront me as a group, and they did. They asked if their dad had cheated on me with Amy. Clearly, they've been talking amongst themselves, and maybe they've suspected something longer than I thought. Even though I have absolute proof, I hesitated to confirm it. Let me explain why. I wouldn't tell them about the explicit content I found. Never. At most, I'd say I discovered messages between Luke and Amy revealing an affair. But I know my kids, and with the exception of Sophie, they wouldn't be satisfied with just that. Carter, sweet, curious Carter, would probably want to see the messages himself. So when they asked me directly if their dad had cheated on me, I just said, I believe he did, yes. And I said it with as much sincerity as I could. I think they believed me. Meanwhile, Tom and Sophie are texting nonstop. From what I can gather, even Amy's kids are starting to doubt the mental breakdown story. They're wondering if this is really about me losing my mind or about their mother being too close to my husband. Poor Jim. I think it's finally sinking in that what he didn't want to believe might actually be true. I haven't shown him or Kat any of the letters or other evidence yet, especially since they're hosting Luke. I haven't had much contact with them at all, but I did have one phone call with Kat where we wished each other well. That was nice. In the background, though, I could hear shouting. Kat quickly stepped outside, but before she did, I caught what sounded like Jim yelling at Luke. Jim never shouts. He's the calmest man I've ever met. So part of me is worried about him, but another part of me is relieved that the wool is finally being pulled from his eyes. According to Kat, Luke is still staunchly denying everything. He was especially upset when he found out I had poached Zach, which honestly gave me a bit of grim satisfaction. And now for the kicker, the test results. Sophie and Tom tested their DNA against each other to see if they were really blood siblings. Here's the surprise. They're not. They don't share any DNA. To everyone who believed Jim had fathered Amy's kids, here is definitive proof he did not, because the test would have shown it. I never believed that theory anyway. Sophie, though, still has doubts. She wonders if the test could have been faulty, and thinks maybe we should take another one just to be certain. But honestly, I'm not really worried about that. I'm more confused than anything. I was so certain Tom had to be Luke's son. Luke thought so too. Now neither of us knows what to think. I obviously know now that the affair happened and lasted for years, and from the letters I've read, Kay is Luke's child, or at least both he and Amy believe she is. That alone confirms they were intimate 15 years ago. But for Tom's sake, I can't stop wondering, if not Luke, then who is his father? He does kind of look like Luke, but maybe that's just coincidence. Things stayed quiet for a few days, until they didn't. Until she finally showed her face. My best friend, Amy, and thank God I installed Ring cameras everywhere because you'll understand why. Sure enough, Amy showed up at my doorstep asking to talk. She seemed calm, almost relaxed, and didn't raise her voice. Assuming she was there on Luke's behalf, I told her I wasn't interested in talking and that she should leave. She didn't. She didn't make a scene either, but she wouldn't go. She insisted we needed to have a conversation. The kids weren't home, and since I had cameras inside and was discreetly recording her on my phone, I eventually relented and let her in. I don't know if she realized she was being recorded. We sat on the couch, and she immediately got to the point. She and Luke know, or at least suspect, that I got damning material from his laptop. Amy accused me of going through his devices and told me that whatever I found wasn't my business, and I needed to delete it. That was all she said. No apology, no admission of guilt, no responsibility for her behavior. She didn't even directly acknowledge what was on Luke's laptop. Maybe she knew she was being recorded, maybe she was just being careful. So I confronted her. I let out some of the anger I've been holding back. I asked her how she could have the nerve to make demands of me after all of this. I asked why she and Luke felt the need to betray me for all these years. I asked her the question that's haunted me forever, and as I expected, she gave me no answer. It was like she wasn't even hearing me. She seemed stressed, panicked even, but she was hiding it. She ignored my questions and just kept insisting I delete everything from Luke's laptop. She told me if I wanted to divorce Luke, fine, that was my choice, but not to drag her into it. That lit a fire in me. I didn't scream, but I snapped. I told her she was already very much a part of this. She just kept repeating her demand. Delete it, delete it, delete it, so I refused. I asked her point blank why I should. Why did I owe her anything? Amy's tone shifted. She got more aggressive, raised her voice, and tried to intimidate me. But I held my ground. She said it wasn't about me, that I needed to do as she said, that it was very important. I asked her again, why? Still no answer. I asked her if Luke had sent her or if she came on her own. Again, nothing. It was like talking to a brick wall. I told her to leave. And just as I'd feared, she wouldn't. She refused to go until I deleted everything right there in front of her. I laughed. I told her no. That wasn't going to happen. That's when I saw her panic break through. She suddenly bolted into the other room, grabbed my laptop, and smashed it on the floor before I could stop her. I honestly don't know what she thought that would accomplish. Maybe she thought destroying my laptop would erase the evidence. Maybe she just panicked. But it didn't matter. I have everything backed up. She accomplished nothing other than breaking my laptop. Unfortunately, that happened just out of camera view, but it doesn't matter. All my important files are saved. At that moment, I was more worried about what else she might do. She looked like she was on the verge of a breakdown. I told her calmly again that she needed to leave, or I would call the police. She refused, and just kept demanding that I drop the whole cheating angle, that I divorce Luke quietly without saying it was because of her. She never once denied the affair. She just didn't want it exposed. I looked at her, this woman I had once considered one of my dearest friends, and told her she didn't owe me anything. But she did owe her children the truth. They had a right to know where they came from, and who Luke really was to them. Amy bristled. She snapped back that it was none of my business, that I didn't understand her family, and that I needed to back off. She circled back again. Divorce Luke if I wanted, but don't claim he had an affair with her. I told her I didn't need her permission to handle my divorce my way, and again told her to leave. That's when she snapped. Her desperation boiled over, and she physically attacked me. I did not expect that. I'm not much of a fighter, but I know the human body well enough to defend myself. She hurt me badly, but I managed to get her off me. That part is on camera, and the audio is on my phone recording. Finally, she left. The second she was gone, I filed a police report. I'd had this strange feeling she might pull something like this, and I wanted to get ahead of it. By the time I had to face my kids, I'd cleaned myself up, though I had a black eye. I downplayed the story, but didn't lie. I told them for their own safety to stay away from Amy. I also sent the footage to Paige and Zach, along with pictures of my injuries before I cleaned them up. They've also printed out the letters referencing Kay as Luke's child. Honestly, I think Amy just completely screwed herself over here. I don't know what her true motive was. Was she protecting Luke? Was this his idea? Or was it just about not wanting the world or her children to know she's a homewrecker? As if people don't already know. The more I talk to people in my circle and share the basics, the more people admit they'd suspected Luke was cheating for a long time, though no one had proof. I suppose Amy doesn't want her kids to know who their father really is, and that lines up. But I'm still not sure about Tom. I didn't ask her about him directly. Fifth update. 6 days later. Hey guys. It's been a rough week. A lot has happened, and I don't really want to talk about all of it in detail right now, so I'll keep this shorter than usual. I know I tend to ramble, but this time I'll be brief. Luke has a lawyer now. I don't know him, but he met with Zach and Paige. To everyone saying I should have had Amy arrested, I probably could have if I'd shown the police the video. But instead, I only sent it to my lawyers. Maybe that makes me foolish, but part of me is still trying to protect the people I once loved. Everything has been on hold these past few days anyway, because Jim had a heart attack. I saw Luke. I saw Amy. I saw Amy's kids at the funeral. It was the first time we'd all been together since everything blew up. Nobody brought up what's going on, other than Amy briefly apologizing for what happened before. She did seem sincere. I'll give her that. But I wasn't about to call her out there. Amy, Luke, and Kat all seemed devastated. I was too. We all agreed to treat that day as a ceasefire. No arguing, no divorce talk, just focusing on Jim, Luke, and I even had a nice conversation about him. I've been spending time with my kids and taking a few days off work. I need it. Luke has seen the kids twice, before and after the funeral, with me and Sophie present. It went well. The kids didn't mention Amy, and Luke didn't try anything sneaky. I think he really does miss them, and I hate that they can't see their dad as much because of all this. The kids are grieving their grandfather on top of missing their dad. Carter has even slept in my bed the last 3 nights. I'll share more details later when I have the energy, but here's something big. Whoever suggested Kat lied about the DNA test results was right. She admitted to me that she never actually sent them in. She said she didn't feel comfortable going behind her son's back. But apparently she did feel comfortable lying to me to protect him, at least until the guilt got to her and she came clean. Under the circumstances, I'm not angry, but I know better than to trust her again. As far as I know, she hasn't told Luke. But this means Tom could still be Luke's son. Honestly, he probably is. My lawyers also finished combing through Luke and Amy's letters. And now I know exactly what Amy didn't want me to see. And I completely understand why she panicked. It's tied to why she and Luke didn't marry conventionally. They did something very, very bad. This is something I don't even feel comfortable sharing here, even anonymously. I haven't even processed it myself. Paige told me not to post it, and I agree. When in doubt, don't put it out there. I've told my lawyers to pin it for now, because I'm in no shape to decide how or if I should use it against them. Honestly, I just feel like crap. It's hard not to blame myself for Jim. I can only imagine Luke and Amy are blaming themselves, too. They are terrible people, and I don't forgive them. But I know this tore them apart just like it tore me apart. And I think all 3 of us feel like the stress of the divorce pushed Jim over the edge. He already had heart disease, but I especially blame myself for showing him the proof of the affair so shortly before he died. I'll carry that with me for a very long time. Even if I shouldn't, I'll update again when I can. I'm sorry.